Hello guys, hope you're doing well. Welcome to this educational video. I'm just going to share my screen. So today we're going to be talking about all things sleep. So as you probably know, as you're probably aware, sleep is obviously very important, but we're going to go through why it's important, also understanding how improving your sleep is hopefully, or it should, or it will improve the level of results that you achieve. Now, when I'm going through this, I'm going to first touch on a little bit of the science and the mechanisms sort of behind sleep and how it sort of all works. The reason why I want to do it like that, and then give you sort of takeaways to apply on how you can improve your sleep, is because if I just give you, what to do, I think you probably maybe understand a few reasons on what to do to improve your sleep. But if I can relate it back to, the science and why, then hopefully it gives you guys a little bit more impetus, if you like, to then go and actually make those changes rather than me saying, go to bed a little bit earlier. Do you know what I mean? It's not very helpful. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of mechanisms. I'm not going to go too deep. I could go really, really deep and in detail, but you probably don't want to know all about that. If you do want to know a little bit more about science, if you want to go into a bit more detail on it, then there's plenty of resources online that you can go into, or reach out, drop me a message, and I'll happily run through whatever it is you want to know. If you want to know it in a bit more detail, we can discuss it on one of your check-in calls or something like that. But yeah, so this is the importance of sleep and recovery. So let's do it. So why do we need sleep? As I said already, you probably understand, why we need sleep, right? In terms of like energy levels, motivation, all of that sort of stuff. When you get a poor night's sleep that you don't feel particularly great. When you have a good night's sleep, you feel better. You've got a better mood. You've got more energy, more motivation. Your decision making is better. All of that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to touch on a few of those things. And then, like I said, I'm going to relate that back to why that's going to be important. So cognitive function, right? Attention, alertness, decision making, your judgment, all of those are going to be affected by sleep or a lack of it, right? Which is important. So if we're trying to stick to a diet, or if we're trying to stick to a training program and we're not sleeping very well, then decision making is going to be impaired. So what happens when you do feel tired? You tend to reach for those less nutritious foods or the more convenience foods, which tend to be slightly higher in calorie, slightly less nutritious, and probably not in line with your fat loss goals, certainly. Same even if you wanted to look and build more muscle. Your motivation to go to the gym is going to be impacted. So getting your sessions in is going to be impacted. Obviously, your recovery as well. So your muscle recovery and performance is going to be impacted. Growth occurs when you're sleeping. That's when your body can go through all of the processes to repair itself, grow, add new tissue, and just basically organize everything that's happened throughout the day. So if we're not sleeping well, then we're not going to be recovering properly. We're not going to be able to sort of grow muscle. We're not going to be able to perform at our best. So again, if you come into the gym super tired, you're probably not going to be hitting PBs, right? It seems fairly obvious, but it's just something that we want to be aware of, because these things are really important if we want to get the best possible results. Metabolic function. So studies have shown that in sleep deprived individuals, it actually decreases their metabolism. So people that aren't sleeping well, their metabolisms generally are lower on average. So this is not something that we want, regardless of whether we're trying to build muscle or drop body fat. Especially so if we're trying to drop body fat, we want our metabolism to be as high as it can be. So if it's decreasing because we're lacking sleep, and it makes sense, right? If you're not sleeping as much, you're probably going to be less likely to move around throughout the day. You're going to be more likely to sort of be lazy, for want of a better term, and expend less energy. Kind of makes sense, right? Immune health, so less likely to get ill. Also reduce risks of like diseases and stuff as well. So, from a health standpoint, it's just so important that we're getting sleep. It's one of the most important things. It should be an absolute non-negotiable that we are aiming to get sort of minimum 7 hours. Ideally, gold standard is around about 8 hours is what we want to be aiming for. If we're getting any sort of less than 7 or less than 6 even, then we're potentially going into that sleep deprived state. So it's something that we really want to address. Also managing blood sugar. So again, our body's ability to utilize carbs, pull glycogen into the muscles, and again help them recover and repair and allow us to perform again is going to be impaired. So again, this potentially, if you're waking up with elevated blood glucose, then potentially, let's say you have a high carb meal, then potentially that blood glucose is going to increase. Your cravings throughout the day is going to be impacted on that, which, yes, it is all about calories in versus calories out when it comes to fat loss. But if you're craving stuff all day, then it's going to be very hard to adhere to that calorie deficit. Endocrine function. So again, our hormones will affect the ability to stick to our plan. We're going to talk about a few hormones during this. But the main two that I want you to be aware of, first of all, is ghrelin and leptin. And essentially, ghrelin is a hunger hormone, and leptin is the hormone essentially that tells us when we're full. Now, when we're sleep deprived or when we don't sleep enough, ghrelin tends to get upregulated, so it gets increased, so our hunger increases. Leptin, on the other hand, downregulates, so we have less leptin, so we feel less full. So you've probably experienced it. I know I have many a times when I've had a poor night's sleep. I feel hungry throughout the day. I feel much hungrier than normal throughout the day, and I eat and I have less of an ability to get full, which if you feel hungry all the time and you're not able to feel full after eating, or less full certainly, then that is just a combination for weight gain, which is obviously not what we want, especially in fat loss. Now again, obviously you might be thinking of this, oh well, my goal is muscle building, so it kind of makes sense. I want to have less sleep so I can eat more. No, it doesn't really work like that, because again, coming back to muscle recovery and performance, we want to make sure that we're recovering well, we're performing well if we want to build as much muscle as possible. All right, so again, those are the two hormones that I want you to be aware of. First of all, going to touch on a couple. Many more reasons why we need sleep. Like I said earlier, again, it's sorting that information throughout the day. So almost like when you're watching this, right, you're learning and your brain is sort of processing all of that. You're not going to take in all of that information, but you're going to take in even less information and be able to sort through it, figure out what's useful information, what's not so useful, if you don't sleep as well. So again, in terms of learning and understanding things better and understanding the events from the previous day and sorting it into, again, usefulness and non-usefulness, if we're not sleeping well, then that's going to be difficult as well. All right. So you may have heard of the circadian rhythm before. Essentially, this is the biological process in which our body naturally wants to wake and fall asleep. All right. So this is dictated generally by sort of sunlight and obviously hormones and things like that. So again, two more hormones that you want to be aware of is cortisol and melatonin. Cortisol, stress hormone. So that ideally what we want in the morning is a nice increase of cortisol, which is what we get, which helps us feel alert. It helps us feel awake essentially. And then melatonin is the hormone that essentially helps us fall asleep and stay asleep. So as you can see from this lovely little graph here, I didn't draw this, I found this on Google. But yeah, as you can see, sort of 6 a.m. and this is going to maybe vary in different people, but 6 a.m. you can see that cortisol begin to rise. So this is when we're going to wake up and feel awake, feel alert. Obviously melatonin is going to come down at this point, and then we're going to get a nice big spike in the morning of cortisol to make us feel awake. A lot of people will say that cortisol is bad and it's going to make you gain weight if you spike in your cortisol. We're going to come on to we'll come on to that in a little bit of detail in a moment, but understand that cortisol is a very important hormone that has its function, and what we want is a good spike in the morning, and then so we want that gradual decrease throughout the day, so that then when we get to bed, it's nice and low, so we're not feeling as awake. Melatonin increases, and essentially we fall asleep and hopefully have a good night's sleep. The other thing that we want to be aware of is a thing called adenosine, which is essentially a substance that's produced in the brain. So the brain will produce this throughout the day, and this essentially builds sleep pressure. So the more adenosine that we have in our brain, the more tired we'll feel. All right. And essentially, when the only way to get rid of adenosine is by going to sleep. So when we sleep, ideally what we want to do is sleep off all of that adenosine, and then when we wake up, adenosine starts to builds that sleep pressure, so that then we essentially fall asleep. Sorry. So at the bottom here, as you can see, we want to ensure that we interfere with the circadian rhythm as little as possible. And there's many things that we can do that will interfere with it, which will make it much harder for us to get a good night's sleep, make it much harder for us to fall asleep, and things like that. So when people are talking about cortisol and you don't want to spike your cortisol and things like that, cortisol has a very important function of yes, it is a stress hormone and it keeps us alert and awake. Obviously, what we want to be doing is making sure that that's low in the evening. What we don't want is that alert for awakeness, high cortisol levels in the evening, because then that's going to impact on sleep, which can then impact on other things like we've obviously just spoken about in terms of feeling more hungry if you've not got a good night's sleep, all of that sort of stuff. So that's something to just be aware of. So the factors that are affecting sleep, and these are the general sort of things that you'll probably come across and you'll probably experience within your day-to-day lives. So nutrition, alcohol, light exposure, stress, both from a psychological and a physical standpoint, and also caffeine. So alcohol is, and a lot of people, will say, oh, I have a nice glass of wine before bed, it helps me get to sleep. Yes, that might be the case in terms of it helps you get to sleep, but the quality of sleep potentially is going to be impacted. So we've got this thing called REM sleep, and this is like the dreaming state. Alcohol will negatively impact like REM sleep and potentially the deep sleep that we experience. Certainly stress will do the same. A real good example of this, or a good not even analogy, but a good example. Imagine if you were in a war zone and you were on the front line, war zone, fighting 24/7, whatever it is. At some point you're going to need to go to sleep, right? At some point you're going to need to go to sleep. Now, you might get a certain amount of sleep, but that sleep isn't going to be of good quality if you're in a war zone, because your body needs to be still alert and ready if something were to happen. So you're not going to get into those deeper stages of sleep, which is ultimately what's going to help you recover and repair. It's going to be a very light sleep, so that if a bomb goes off down the road, you're awake, you're alert, everything, you know what's happening, all of that sort of stuff. Whereas you don't want to be dreaming and you wake up thinking, oh, what's going on? Where am I? I'm a soldier. You need to be alert. You need to be ready for whatever is happening. So that's a sort of stress is going to impact on your ability to get a good night's sleep. So yes, you might be sleeping 8 hours, but is that 8 hours good quality? If your levels of stress are high, cortisol levels are high in the evening, then potentially it's not going to be. So this is where we want to make sure we're winding down before bed, make sure we're relaxing as much as we can. And this means actually doing things that are relaxing. A lot of people watch or do things that are very, very interesting, or makes them feel very on, if that makes sense. So for example, like I'm not doing work like this, for example, late in the evening, right before bed, because yes, okay, I'm sat at my desk, I'm at my computer, yes, I'm not exerting any sort of energy, but I'm very, very on. Like I'm making sure that this is good quality presentation, all of that sort of stuff. I'm very on. So if you're doing work late at night, that's meaning that you're doing like presentations or something like that, then you're going to be very on. There's going to be a stress response to that, which is going to again impact that level of sleep. Same with like the physical side of things. You don't want to be doing like an extremely high intensity workout just before bed, because again, cortisol levels are going to go up. It's going to impact your ability to get a good night's sleep and get to sleep as well. Light exposure, again, obvious reasons. When we wake up in the morning, we get nice light exposure. That's what helps us feel awake. That's what helps our cortisol get high. So that's what we want in the morning. In the evenings, we want to try and limit the light exposure. All right. So TVs, phones, we want to try and limit that as much as we can, because if we are sat in bed, phone in hand, we're getting that light straight into the eyes. That's telling our body essentially it's time to be awake. It's time to be awake. It's going to be very difficult then for you to get to sleep or get a good night's sleep. Caffeine is an interesting one. So I spoke about adenosine on the last slide. Now, adenosine basically is, like I said, a compound that attaches to receptors in the brain. And as it attaches to those receptors, it builds sleep pressure. So the more adenosine that we have that attaches to the receptors, the more tired we'll feel. Caffeine attaches to those same receptors, which is essentially what allows caffeine, or what means caffeine is gives us that wakefulness, that energy, because it doesn't allow adenosine to bind to those receptors, which gives us that alertness, that wakefulness of caffeine. Now, the problem with this is that our brain doesn't stop producing adenosine just because the caffeine is binded. So we get this build up of adenosine, and then as that caffeine wears off, all that adenosine rushes in, and this is why you tend to get this crash when you have caffeine. So if you're getting like a mid-afternoon crash, what tends to happen? I have another coffee. All of a sudden, you're still building up loads and loads of adenosine, which if you've got more and more built up, when you go to sleep and you're not able to sleep all of it off, that is potentially why you may wake up feeling groggy, a little bit sleepy, feel like you don't have a full night's sleep. It's that abuse of caffeine for many of us, many people that, needs to be changed. And again, you wake up groggy, you wake up feeling tired. What do? Have a coffee. And again, you're just essentially just building this sleep deprivation, which is obviously what we want to avoid. So those are the sort of things that you want to be aware of when it comes to impacting on your sleep. So let's look at how to improve your sleep then. So these are just a few things. There are many other things that you can obviously do, but these are probably the main sort of take homes that I want you guys to understand in terms of how you can improve your sleep. So first of all, sleeping in a pitch dark room. So investing in some blackout blinds is going to be very helpful. If you can get some curtains, whatever, make the room as dark as possible. You don't want street lights penetrating through the windows or anything like that. Standby lights I'm really big on. So like turning, if you've got a TV in your room, or if you've got, I don't know, a fan or whatever, those standby lights, turn them all off, turn all off of the wall, all off of the plug, so you don't have any artificial light. It's been shown that they can impact on your sleep quality. I know it seems very silly, like the really small lights, but yeah, it can impact on sleep. So it's something to be aware of. Try and turn all of those off. And like I said, sleep in a pitch dark room. Managing daylight exposure. So obviously just spoke about that a little bit. Can we get sunlight exposure in the morning? Obviously sunlight is a rarity in the UK, but can we get some natural light in the morning? Again, that's going to help that cortisol spike in the morning, and then that's going to give us that natural decline throughout the day, which is then going to help us wind down and relax in the evening and get a good night's sleep. As we just spoke about, managing caffeine intake. So caffeine has a half-life of 5 hours. So if you can imagine you're having, say you have a coffee at say 5 in the evening, say 100 milligrams of coffee, and that is essentially going to be, there's still going to be some of that. It's got a half-life of 5 hours. So if you have one at, what did I say, 10 o'clock, that is the equivalent of having half a cup of coffee, which you guys probably aren't going to go and do if you're going to bed at sort of 10, 11 in the evening. It's like having a half a cup of coffee before bed. That's essentially what's happening. So with caffeine intake, what I'd look to do is try and have almost like a curfew, have a period. For myself, I don't usually drink any caffeine beyond sort of 1, 2 p.m., something like that. And use it sparingly. If you're waking up and you feel like you need a coffee, then again, all of those processes like we spoke about, then potentially you're just not sleeping well enough. Your body should feel awake in the morning. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have a coffee in the morning. I know for a lot of people that morning ritual of having a coffee is an enjoyable thing, and I'm not saying that you can't have that, but just be very, very aware of it. Try and utilize coffee for its performance enhancement rather than abusing it, essentially. So I think the recommended intake, I'd have to double check this, is about 400 milligrams, which I think is quite high, which is about 4 cups of coffee. I think is the daily allowance or the daily limit, which I think is quite high. But yeah, try not to go over that. And like I said, try to use it more so as a performance enhancer rather than a necessity to sort of wake up in the morning, if that makes sense. Of course, managing screen time, especially in bed. So you want to limit artificial light exposure. So again, phones, TVs in the bedroom, all of that sort of stuff is probably not conducive to a good night's sleep. I was very big when we moved out of not having a TV in the bedroom, and I can honestly say, in terms of quality of sleep from living at home when I had a TV in my room compared to now, is night and day. Pardon the pun. So yeah, that was a really big thing. If you can not have a TV in the room, then that's going to be beneficial. From just a entertainment, like if you've got loads of entertainment in your room, if that's a place where you associate, watching TV and all of that sort of stuff, it's also going to be very, very hard for you to go to sleep. So if you can keep the TV out of the bedroom, then great. If you do have a TV in the room, then like I said, just try and limit right before bed. Try not to watch it as you're going to sleep and stuff like that. I'd really advise that in order to get a better night's sleep. I said there as well, potentially invest in some blue light blocking glasses. So this is more for people if you are, if you have to work, or if you are, if you're working late, or, you are on your phone for whatever reason, then it could be a good investment to get some blue light blocking glasses, as that can help improve your sleep quality. But don't just buy them so that you can scroll TikTok in bed. That's not what I'm recommending you do. Again, what we want to do is make sure that we're having good habits. If, like I said, you are working late and things like that, then it could be a very good investment. So keep a nice cool room temperature, 18 to 22 degrees. Some people like it a little bit colder. Some people like it a little bit warmer. That's sort of a rough range for most people. As you know, when we get that 2 days of 30 degrees in the UK, sleeping is an absolute nightmare because it's so hot. So during the summer months, if you can, invest in a fan, windows open, that sort of stuff. If you've got a thermostat that you can set to a certain temperature, then again, that's going to be beneficial to help you get the best possible night's sleep. When it comes to an evening routine, having something that you can sort of wind down. So again, are we relaxing? Are we doing things that are going to spike that cortisol? If so, we want to try and avoid those things. We want to avoid as much stress as possible. We want to try and be relaxing in the evening. Can we wind down? Can we get into a routine that helps us get prepared for bed? If we can, it's going to be much easier for us to get to sleep. It's going to be much easier, or it's going to be much more likely that we're going to get a better night's sleep. So very important that we try and implement some sort of routine. And this doesn't have to be like an extravagant hour-long routine of doing this, that, and the other. It can be simple, like going upstairs, brushing your teeth, writing down a to-do list for the next day, stuff like that. Maybe reading a book for 10-15 minutes and then taking yourself off to bed. Something simple like that can be very, very effective in helping you get a better night's sleep. Also, with the TV that you're watching, as I said, are you watching stuff that's like horror movies or stuff? That's probably going to spike your cortisol. Can you watch, things like comedy? Easy watching is what I would recommend before bed, hour before bed, something like that. Something that's easy to watch that you can sort of switch off. Things like Love Island, reality TV, all of that sort of shit is generally an easy watch, and it's probably pretty good stuff to watch before trying to go to bed, because you're not on watching it, stuff like that. Obviously, if you get mega involved in something like that, then maybe not the thing to watch. But yeah, just trying to have a good routine is obviously going to be helpful. And then finally, it's just being consistent with these sleeping habits. So all of these things, can you be consistent with them? Just like you would be consistent with your training routine in the gym, just like you'd be consistent with your nutrition. The best possible results is if you are consistent with these for a long term. So don't try and implement everything that you see here, and then after a week, you give up. Can you start implementing some small things? So it might be just investing in some blackout blinds to start with. It might be then having a caffeine curfew, not drinking caffeine beyond 12 p.m. or whatever it is. Slowly implement these habits so that you can actually build good habits and actually be consistent with it. If you go to the gym and hit all your workouts for 1 week, you're not going to build a substantial amount of muscle. If you hit all your calories spot on for a week, you're not going to lose loads of fat. It's just like with sleep. Although sleep will probably be, you'll probably feel it a lot quicker. Like a good night, once you get a good night's sleep, like it's pretty instant in terms of like your mood and stuff like that. But the more consistent that you can be implementing these habits over a long period of time, the better results that you will achieve. So yeah, I hope this video was useful. I hope it was helpful. If you guys have got any questions that you want to go through, if there's anything that you want to go through in a little bit more detail, if there's anything that you're unsure of, then please reach out, drop me a message, and I'd be happy to help. But yeah, hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.